All right, welcome back to another live. I'm your host, Joseph Lewin, and today I'm excited to have Devin Paxton on the show, and we're going to be talking about brand in the age of AI. So, AI, people say that it can do anything, it can create content instantly. A lot of people feel like, man, why do I need a marketing team? Why do I need brand? Does that stuff even matter anymore? So, we're going to be diving in and talking a little bit about that topic because man, everybody's using AI. It's pretty much. I don't really want to spend all of our time talking about AI because it's kind of a little bit talked about and everybody talks about it all the time. But it does apply to basically everything we're doing in the marketing world. So I'd love to level set Devin by just talking about does brand still matter as we're starting to use AI more?
Absolutely. I think brands actually, you know what? AI is something that's constantly used by everyone today. And your brand, whether it's your solo brand, whether it's a company's brand, it matters because it relates to humans. So you need to have a human element behind it. So yes, your brand still matters.
So yeah, maybe a good way to do it is everybody kind of has a slightly different definition of what brand is. So from your perspective, uh, what is a brand?
Well, to me, a brand is a feeling. So it is. So many people want to slap a logo, they want to slap colors, they want to slap all of these things to assemble a brand. It really is just a feeling that you give out to people and what they take in return. So that's what it's creating is trust and recognition. And that's what a strong brand will help and pull people in over time.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you give it that definition, and I would say something similar. It's basically like it's what goes in front of you in the market. It's your reputation, it's the trust that people have, and then ultimately, to your point, it's a it really comes down to human emotion and the way that people feel about you, whether as an individual or as a company. How you make people feel. That gets into brand, which in the business context it can feel a little touchy feely, a little emotional, whatever. And so I think people sometimes dismiss the value of that, but we are selling to humans, and humans are buying what we're doing. And sure, if you sell something that's like a pure commodity, could some of the buying process be run by AI? Possibly at some point. But for most things that you sell, especially in a complex B2B sale, uh,
Yeah,
the humans are involved, and that's why brand still matters.
it really does. Being authentic too helps. Being authentic helps break through the noise. So many brands are founded on that, right? Nike's a great example. It was an element that was created, shoes, right? They found their target audience, they understood exactly what their people needed, right? They listened to their audience, and so from there they developed like an authentic brand that resonates. So you got Michael Jordan, you got all of these key figures that in the realm of NBA, NFL, all these key figures to help really put that lift that brand and continue to tell that story.
Yeah. So then, if you're going to establish a brand, I think that the easy thing to do, especially if you're a smaller business or you don't have like a brand team, if you're a big company, you've got a brand team, it's kind of a different story, right? But if you're a smaller business, I think a lot of people at this point will turn to something like ChatGPT and start doing some brainstorming and stuff like that, which there's value to doing that. I'm not going to say that that's wrong, but then the interesting thing about brand in particular is that it's what makes you stand out, right? It's the
Right.
differentiator between you and other people. And there's so much that's involved in that. It's your positioning, it's your messaging, it does, your colors and all that do factor into that to a degree. It's the way that people feel about you because of your customer service and your sales team and how well your product delivers. There's so many elements involved, but then you really only get sometimes a half a second at different
Right.
points in time for people to interact with your brand. So if you're just going to say ChatGPT to develop your brand and your brand strategy, ChatGPT is basically a culmination of what's normal. And
Right.
so, if you're really leaning heavily on ChatGPT and not doing some other things to build your brand and to figure out your brand, uh, where your brand stands in the market, then you're probably going to end up creating something that's just basically generic. Anyway, I'm saying all of that as uh, a lead in to, what are some ways that people can start developing their brand.
Right. Well, I think to really start developing your brand is one, getting aligned with before making an action. So, um, so many people start with making content first, that they don't dive into like the deeper questions of themselves or of their brand. So like first thing you always need to do is like listen to who your target audience is. You got to figure out what's their pain point. What what do they like, what do they need like right now, like what, figuring out those key fundamental things before doing an action is so important. So obviously there should be some steps involved before just going out there and like creating content. you know um I see so many people, I see so many brands just go out there, create, and it doesn't resonate with their target audience. And it's understanding who they are first. Then from there, you create your foundation, your fundamentals, and then you continue to build your assets and all the things that just tend to funnel in.
Yeah, so a lot of times people are wanting to start with the content or the marketing campaign, but to your point, there's some fundamentals. So if you want to start figuring out more about who your ideal customer is, what are some steps that you would recommend that people take to figure that out?
Well, one, I first to figure out who your people are, understand what your brand is trying to deliver, right? For example, for me, about 6 months ago, I was just like constantly seeing like, you know, I started in marketing about 10 years ago, and something I've noticed, going in as a junior marketer, there's a lot of key terms that I didn't understand. And so from there, I started realizing with me, it resonated with me that like, there's a lot more people out there who don't understand marketing jargon. Like they don't understand what CRM means. They don't know what KPI means. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to take what I didn't used to know and all this knowledge now that I have, and I'm going to create a clear outline of how this is going to look,
Mm.
from a perspective view for so that so what I did was I just started going online, researching, going in Google. Because, if you go in Google and you type like a question, it also gives you 10 other related questions, right? These are common questions that other people are asking. So
Hmm.
once I kind of figured that out, I was like, okay, so this is a common thread, right? That people are looking for. So I started developing a strategy behind that, right? How can I take all of these, all of this information that I know and these questions that people are asking, and how can I funnel that and create something that people can relate to? And so what I did was I actually just started to, I built my foundation, I created my content pillars, I created a strategy I have my, content calendar where I look out in advance, see what's happening, maybe make a few tweaks here and there, but, creating something that people will see, that's more evergreen, not staying on trends. Like, there's so many things that are happening, pushing out all the time, right? With
Yeah.
trends. Those are really great to really capture someone in the moment, but sometimes some people might realize it might not capture your actual brand. So
Yeah.
actually having really good, clear strategy on evergreen content where people can constantly come back. It might not get the views, it might not go viral for you, but it's something that people will constantly see and remember you for, because that's your way of being authentic to your brand.
Yeah. And I mean, you're diving into doing customer research and, and getting into that side of things. And that is one area, especially in B2B marketing, that I feel like people undervalue
Yes.
big time. Like even just who are your customers that you have right now? Obviously, if you're starting out like you were, you've kind of got to just try to figure that out, right? And I found that taking similar strategy as you are, where where you're doing some research initially to try to figure out who you're going after, and then just
Right.
trying to talk to as many of those people who fit that description as possible, and figure out what are they saying, and you can do that
Yep.
online, but you can also do that by starting to go to in-person groups that those people go to. You can, I mean, my favorite way, obviously, because that's what we're doing right now, is to invite people to come on a show and get to learn about the market and what's going on, and getting to really understand what people are feeling and experiencing, because the things that really set your brand apart, from my perspective, are going to be the things that your customers think but don't always say. And
Yep.
if you're able to speak to things that people feel and that they think, but that they haven't necessarily talked about, or they talk about behind closed doors with their friends, they're not going to talk about that necessarily outside of that, or sometimes in their searches. It's kind of maybe the first place that people go to outside of their mind. When you can
Right.
start to speak to those things, then that tends to resonate a lot more, especially around the pains and problems that people are experiencing. Or, I mean, it's kind of a pain point also, but also what's keeping them from getting where they want to be. And ultimately speaking to, hey, you want to be here, but there's this thing that's keeping you from getting there. And when you can
Right.
speak to that, that resonates so much more than just like trying to copy your competitors' messaging or something like that.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so what I'd love to do is you talked about a bunch of different pieces there of ultimately developing a marketing campaign, and that kind of establishes your brand, where you're figuring out who these people are, what's important to them, creating content around some pillars, creating your content calendar, everything like that. So I'd love for you to tell me about a time where you've worked with either in a job that you've been in or a client you've worked at, where you've uh, seen that work.
Right. So, actually, about a year ago, I was working on many um, independent movie campaigns. So, I was working for a small independent movie production company, and I was, the director of marketing, and I was just really making sure that all these films, small films, they didn't have a mass budget. A lot of films didn't have a recognizable name, but how do we get that in front of people, right? Well, the one campaign that really stands out to me to this day still it's a small indie film called Love Reconsidered. And it's a rom-com. It's focused around Valentine's Day. It was launching on Valentine's Day, which is really great. So we can center our core messaging around love. It's about a girl who couldn't find love on Valentine's Day. So it was just, it was kind of, that soul of that film was really a great time when it was coming out and for this digital release. So what I did was I created a multi-channel campaign, which included socials, organic content, influencer partnerships, paid ads, even grassroots storytelling. So I really honed in and tried to talk to the filmmakers, like, hey, like, what are your pain points? What's something that you would like to see for this film? And then I would connect with the cast, and this cast actually had some actual recognizable faces. One was Sophie Van Hasselberg, who would be the daughter of Bette Midler. So when you see her, you definitely see she looks like her mama, Bette Midler, which is great. So you're like 1 inch away from like talking to like Bette Midler, which is really great. And then another recognizable cast was none other than Colton Haynes. He was in the TV series of Teen Wolf. Really recognizable person. So like having those faces is really what's going to catapult and grabs people's attention, because we see when we are scrolling right on our social media, or if we're going on YouTube and we're looking up something, the first thing that we're going to click on from the clickbait is going to be something that recognizes or resonates with us, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm a film enthusiast, right, and I am going to be going on and I'm looking for upcoming films, I'm going to click on something the clickbait that seems to be most recognizable to me. So I really, resonated the buzz of this film around the recognizable people and making sure their names are being pushed out there, right? So, the first thing that came in my head was, okay, so we really need to create some really put a lot of money into paid ads, right? So that's through Google, YouTube, and Meta, of course. And finding the target audience getting it out to them, working with the movie was in small independent movie theaters. So, I work really closely with this theater saying, hey, how can I help you push this film out in your area? So I created a lot of those, targeted campaigns. I really, with, paid ads, I really center that around like someone's in like New York City. So I try to really filter into that area and get people to come out. But outside of that, having a really clear organic content strategy for socials, making sure that, the messaging of paid ads was also very in the same messaging for organic, whether continuously telling the same story. So from there, having all of these different elements to really create this campaign really did really well, because it ended up the movie ended up doing like really great impressions overall. I think it was like 174,000 impressions overall. But what was really great was having the cast be on the Today Show, having the Bravo network just talk about the film, having channels, press just talking about the film really helped kick off that campaign. And most importantly, collaboration, right? When you're working in that specter of that industry, right, you're really focusing on, who are going to be your core people to really help push it, right? Well, one is your cast, but second is press, right? If the Hollywood Reporter is talking about your film, the chances of your film to be seen to a greater audience is exponential, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. But so there's just a
Awesome.
lot of powerful results that came out of this campaign.
Yeah, I love it, man. That's good stuff. So, I mean, we kind of got into some practical pieces around marketing campaigns and brand a little bit already, but I always like to leave people with some practical steps. So, as people who are listening to this are going, hey, I want to develop my brand more. I want to be a little bit more targeted and strategic in what I'm doing. What are some practical takeaways that you would love for people to take away from this episode?
Well, one, define your brand DNA, right? What are your core values? What kind of voice do you want to have? And like, of course, on top of it, your visual identity, right? You got to ask yourself, if my brand was to walk into a room, like, what would it say? And how would it make people feel? That's something to really take away with a brand, because, it's an extension of yourself or the people that's working behind that brand.
Yeah, I love that. And one thing to kind of add on to that as we wrap up here is, again, I think people like to become very clinical in marketing, but brand is one of those things that makes your deals close faster. It makes any kind of cold outreach that you do more effective, because, like, let's just say you get a cold outreach email in your inbox.
Yeah.
If that cold outreach is from I've never heard of you.com, compared to, you get an email and it's from HubSpot or Salesforce or Microsoft, and you're getting cold outreach from one of those companies, there's a very high likelihood you're going to open that email and at least glance at it. Whereas if it's from a brand you've never heard of, you're probably not going to open it. If it's from a person that you've met through LinkedIn and you've seen their content and they do cold outreach to you, you're so much more likely to open that email, especially if you associate a good feeling with that person, or trust or authority or whatever. And then same with your sales cycles, your deals closing faster. It's going to close faster if people already know who you are. Because one of the biggest things people are asking is this going to work for me? And can I trust that this person is going to be able to deliver, or this company? And people already have that trust going in. And so I feel like a lot of times people overlooked brand because they want to go for the performance metrics. Like, I spent this amount of money and I got this amount back. But brand, as you focus on brand, it keeps those numbers steady. Whereas if you don't focus on brand, it's always going to be more expensive the more performance marketing that you do. The more you're pushing for paid ads or cold calling or whatever. So brand is definitely something that people shouldn't be sleeping on. Something that they should that everybody should be working through. But awesome, Devin. How can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. My name is Devin Paxton, but I'm also on socials under Grow with Devin, where I help people, founders, junior marketers, sole entrepreneurs, just understand marketing and the jargon that becomes behind it, and I give you educational content. really fun, very simple. It's humor. It's a little cheeky, but you're getting some tangible insights, and most importantly, you're not doom scrolling. You're getting some education behind it.
I love it. Awesome, Devin. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Really appreciate it. And everybody listening, we'll see you on the next live.
Thank you, Joseph.